All right, Dr. Josiah, thank you for doing this for me. This is going to be some questions that I have for you that's going to be focused on helping us do some of the things you're already doing. So I know you've been extremely successful here lately. I want all my docs in my offices to see this and to help me implement some of these things. I'll also send it out to some of my colleagues that I know it will help them as well grow their practices and implement some of these things. Um, for my docs that don't know exactly where you're at, I've talked to you some. Is the number 5.5 million? Is that the gross that where your clinic is at? Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, that was our number last year. Right now we're on track for a little over 6 million this year.
Okay, awesome.
Yep.
So I am gonna dive into how you got there and everything you're doing. But first, I also, because I've watched several of these workshops and videos that you've done, and by the way, thank you for trying to help other doctors and sharing this information with us
Of course.
because that really means a lot. Um, your story. So when I first heard somebody is doing 5.5 million, you know, I'm thinking, man, that person must have had a lot of money to be able to invest in a lot of expensive equipment and build out this extremely nice facility. And, I'm sure they probably invested several million into it just getting started, but that's not your story. Um, can you tell me about your story and where you came from and how you started this?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, growing up, one in nine kids, very, very low income family. Nicest car we ever had was $500. I started working actually in third grade to help the family. I started delivering newspapers with my mom. I actually woke up at 2:30 a.m. every day before I went to school and delivered newspapers for 4 hours. My third grade teacher was always, ask, how kids' mornings were, and then me, I'd already worked 4 hours before I went to third grade, and she just was in, disbelief. And so I ended up
Wow.
making 4 hours a day working. My mom ended up paying me about $300 a month, in third grade. For that's about $10 a day, 4 hours. So I guess I was making about $2.50 an hour. I actually never did the math until today. That's actually good. I never thought about that. And so yeah, so I mean, I bought my own bike. I bought most of my own clothes. Sometimes like my family would be short on money, and I would pay for dinner. I would buy groceries. And so as I got older, I was like, man, obviously not, have the funds to, the support to go to college. I needed to figure out how to get a scholarship. So worked really, really hard. Ended up being pretty good at athletics. And so I ended up getting a full ride football scholarship to go to college. So I went there, kind of similar mindsets. My grandma was like, the pinnacle of society, is a medical doctor. And I was like, oh, I'm going to try and do that. So I was down all that past, worked at a hospital. I was about to take the MCAT, ended up getting hurt playing football, went to this local chiropractor, and he's like, hey, you can be a doctor and an entrepreneur. And I was like, what's an entrepreneur? I don't even know what that word means. My dad was working at Red Lobster. My mom's delivering newspapers still. My dad, to this day, still is a waiter at an Italian restaurant. And so I really had no idea, but I was like, wow, it sounds like I could be in control of my future. That's what entrepreneur sounded to me, was like freedom and control. And if I put in the time, effort, and energy, the possibilities were just up to me of where I was successful. And up until that point, that's where I'd realized at an early age, if I put in the time, effort, and energy, I can get the things that I want. If I put in the time, effort, and energy, I can get the scholarship. If I put in the time, effort, and energy, I can go to the school that I want to. And so I was like, okay, why don't I just apply this exact same thing to learning how to be an entrepreneur? So when I went to chiropractic school, quickly realized I don't teach anything about running a business. And so started saying, well, asking other students, well, how do you learn this? How do you learn this? Quickly realized one of the best opportunities was doing screenings for other doctors. And so second trimester at Palmer, ended up going to this clinic out in the state of Washington, and I booked over 99 appointments in 2 days at a home show, paid appointments for this doctor. And he's like, how did you do that? You booked me out for the next 6 weeks. And he started telling all of his friends that they should bring me out. And so for literally for the next 3 years in chiropractic school, I had about 3 to 5 doctors a week asking to fly me out to their office to screen for them. And so I ended up going over 50 different offices, all paid for. my wife started coming with me, and then my son was born. He started coming with me. And so that's how I learned communication, marketing. And then I started, staying in their office, Mondays or coming out Fridays and trying to learn the insides and outs of running the practice. That way I could be as successful as possible. So that's really how I learned more of the framework, business, chiropractic, communication, really just devoted myself to that knowledge outside of just the basics they teach in chiropractic school. And then graduated February 2017, opened our office 4 months later, and we already had 400 prepaid appointments before our first day open. And yeah, speaking of money, it didn't come from money, didn't have anything. We were very thankful. My wife, family took out a home equity line of credit against me to get a bank loan.
Wow.
And so that's the minimal funds that we opened with. She doesn't come from my wife, very low to middle class family as well.
Mm.
And so that's how I opened, and yeah, did over $1 million our first year, over $2 million our next year. And then by our fourth year, we were over $5 million in 1,800 square feet.
Dude, your story gives me goosebumps, man. I love that. I love it. Can I ask you more specifically, how did you get 400 prepaid appointments? Was
Yeah,
that,
it was all networking, chamber events, and screenings. Like those are the only things I knew. Marketing, I didn't know anything. Digital marketing, like nothing else. We literally just joined all the local chambers and did, screenings at every event that we could, farmers markets, craft shows, we never really had a big event. We just did like pure volume. I was
how
doing
far in
5 to 7
advance, if you
events a
don't,
day for
how,
networking.
how far in advance did you start? Like before you opened?
We started booking appointments about 2.5 months before we opened. Yeah.
And you said how many events a day did you do?
So not screenings, but just like total marketing events. We did about 5 to 7 a day. Those were mostly all networking, like going to chamber events, setting up like coffees and just meeting everybody locally, getting to know those people. And then, like I said, then we were trying to find, events every weekend for screenings.
Nice. Okay. Now I want to back up a second. You said that you had learned about entrepreneurship in college. And so tell me what you don't just have a $5.5 million chiropractic office. Like what other things are you invested in and you do? Because that's a long list, right?
Yeah, and I do want to preface that too, because that's where I feel like a lot of doctors, start getting successful and they're like, what should I go? What should I start another business? Should I invest here? Should I get into real estate? Like all those other things. And, I do a lot of those other things. And so I don't want to sound as a hypocrite because of that, because to me, it's a progression that most people never max out the productivity and efficiency of their business first. And so here's what I always tell everybody is number one place you get the highest ROI ever investing by far and away, number one, no questions asked, nothing's ever close, is yourself.
Yeah.
Investing in yourself, personal development, personal growth, learning more skills, learning more knowledge, being smarter so you can grow faster and faster, faster. That's going to be number one, nothing competes to it. Number two is by far and away your business. And the ROI that you can by reinvesting into your business, by scaling your business, by more marketing, more sales, training team, operations, all those types of activities, by far and away number two. And so here, kind of from a scale, it's like here's yourself, here's your business, and then like here is anything else. And so there's such a massive gap between those top two things and anything else. But so many people want to jump to the shiny object syndrome much, much faster. And honestly, the only reason I ever got into anything outside of myself and my business is because, like I said, we were at 1,800 square feet, got up over 1,100 visits a week, doing over 5 million in one location. Like I couldn't put, anything else into the business. And so my, bank account was just rapidly scaling where I couldn't reinvest fast enough into myself and into the business. At least from my knowledge at that point,
Yeah.
hindsight bias, I could think of some things now that I didn't know my first year, my second year, that I could have invested faster back into my business. And so I'm even more solidified, that I should have done those things rather than other investments. But I did get to that point, yes, where, I was maxing my business out, maxing myself out personally and business as much as I possibly knew into my limitations. And then at that point, I said, okay, I know this money just can't sit in the bank account and lose money to inflation. Where can I, put this that it's actually going to work for me, not just sit in the bank account and do nothing. And so that's how I got, into, the different investments that I have. And so, yeah,
Yeah.
right now have, over 70 Airbnbs. I have over 500,000 square feet of commercial space just closed on a 420,000 square foot commercial building, largest building in our entire city. I have 2 different farms, 4,000 head cattle feedlot, a hotel that I converted into a 35 unit multifamily, multiple other commercial retail strips. We're developing a whole 40-acre warehouse space. That's about a $20 million project. And
Awesome.
yeah, and then also just started a new company where we do bookkeeping for chiropractors, specifically with giving them strategic insights of what they can do on a monthly basis of how they can grow and scale their business, at a faster
Yeah.
level.
Which I want to talk about here in just a second as well, because I want to make sure I'm maximizing that. I know I'm already signed up and using that. So I want to talk about what that is and how to maximize it here in just a second. But you're definitely the kind of person I want to hang out with, man. You're getting stuff done. I
Appreciate
love it.
it. Yeah,
I
thank you.
love it. I love it. Okay, so bef- next thing I want to ask is I would like to, okay, so I have a two-part question. It first starts with what all kinds of things, I know we're doing chiropractic. What other niches do you do?
Yeah, good question. So that's kind of the evolution for my business. Yeah, started off pure chiropractic, adjustments, exams, x-rays. That's all we did. I mean, from day one, we've been between 95 and 97% cash. So last year we were 97% cash collected. And so that's all I did, scaling, growing my business. That's all I had experience with. Most of the clinics I went to were just pure chiropractic, which I 100% agree is the foundation, for health, getting your nervous system function first and foremost. But then what ended up happening was third year open was COVID. And 2020 hit, and as I told you earlier, all my marketing strategies were all in person. Screenings, health talks, networking events, everything that all died, overnight, right? And so that's when I realized is like, holy cow, like what other marketing strategies can I do? I hadn't done any Facebook ads, I hadn't done really much for internet marketing. Our services were all in person. So I was like, okay, I need to look what other ways that I can maximize the potential of my clinic rather than being peaked out, and also, not have to utilize in-person marketing strategies. So long story short, my personality type, what's called I'm an 8 out of 10 quick start, and an 8 out of 10 fact finder. And so I do all the front end work and figure out what is the best possible thing I can do. Obviously when I go to a restaurant, I might take a little longer, but at the end of the decision, like I made the best decision. I know I picked the best option. I am 100% certain that I made the best decision. I'm getting the best meal, on the menu. And that's really like all my decisions from a business perspective. I take a little bit longer to make the initial decision, but then once I make the decision, hell to the floor. So I actually had, it's either 42 or 47 pages of typed notes that I accumulated over about a 3-month period during COVID when I was researching what's the next best thing to add into my clinic. That number one is going to improve the results for my patients, and number two is going to fit in with my model, of simplicity, scalability, and cash focused. And so the first thing we added in was a gut health protocol. Then we added in a neuropathy protocol where all of the parts of the protocol are all 100% done from home, so that the bottleneck of our location didn't inhibit our, continued revenue growth.
Gotcha. So you're saying gut and neuropathy and chiropractic?
Yep, exactly. Yep. Those are the only 3 things I did to go. Then I went from 2 million to 5 million.
Wow. And so do you have like any other kind of practitioner, like a nurse practitioner or anything like that in there?
We just brought in a nurse practitioner last year, but that'll help, like I said, take us to over 6 million, then to 7 million with that provider. But we only had 3, and then we added a 4th chiropractor when we went to 5 million.
Okay, so that's one thing I wanted to ask you about. So Can you, I mean, I know that you're not going to be like extremely accurate with these numbers probably, but give us an idea of the timeline from what niches you added to um what got you to 5.5, meaning like you hit 1 million on with chiropractic, 1.5 or something or what, and then you were able to add, and what got you to the next level and the next level, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so uh, 0 to 2 million purely chiropractic. Then the next year, when we added gut health neuropathy, we went to 5 million. You know, chiropractic probably went up to about 3 million, and then neuropathy was probably about 1.75, 1.5, and then gut health, 250 to 500,000.
So you're saying you got to like 2 million with just chiro, and then with chiro gut and neuropathy, you were able to get to 5.5.
You got it. Yep.
Okay, so that changes my questions then. How'd you get to 2 million with just chiropractic?
Yeah. I mean, like I told you earlier, literally just volume of low cost marketing strategies, networking events, screenings, and then we started doing health talks. We provide free breakfast or lunch, do a quick, 10-minute presentation, and then bring people in the office. Uh, and
How
then, yeah,
many doctors at 2 million?
3.
3. Wow.
Yeah.
What does your chiropractic look like? Is it adjustments, rehab, exercises? What, does it like a 4-month care plan, a 1-year care plan? Do you mind sharing that stuff with me?
Yeah, yeah, of course. Yeah. No adjustment or no rehab, just adjustments. Yeah. Typically, like when we first opened, we started off 12-month plans, and but then we pretty quickly transitioned. Now we do 4-month initial chiro plans, and then we typically do a corrective plan for about 8 months, and then they transition into wellness care once a week or every other week, after that. Yeah. So just
On an auto debit every month or something?
exactly. Yep. So just adjustments, exams, and X-rays.
Nice. Did you implement any system? Like, was it TRP or anything like that? Or,
So when I was a student, a lot of the doctors that needed help with screenings was with AMPed
mm,
protocol, and then
hmm.
that's kind of what gave me the understanding of the screenings and kind of the grassroots marketing.
Okay.
And then, yeah, then added in the blueprint, gut health and neuropathy protocol. And then from a structural, like scalability standpoint, that's when I did EOS, which TRP has kind of a system of that they call COS with a structure, uh, rhythms of scaling. And so I think that was kind of the fulcrum, that kind of took me to the next level, was establishing the structure and the rhythms of a continual feedback loop of what's going well, what are my strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, challenges, and then reevaluating those every single week to continually stay ahead of any plateaus.
Awesome, dude. I think it's so amazing you got to 2 million with just chiropractic, because I feel like people think they can't even get to 1 million with that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, if we had, like I said, we didn't hit a bottleneck of 1,800 square feet. We opened our hours. I mean, and COVID, I genuinely feel like we were on the trajectory to then probably do 3 million in just pure Cairo, 2020. And if we didn't have capacity issues, it's kind of tough to hindsight bias, no, but
Yeah.
for me, that was kind of people say there's some COVID blessings. For me, that was the blessing, was that little bit of slowdown, for a period of time where then I could do some more introspection, of what is the next best step. I had a little more free time to look inward and figure out what's the next thing I can implement to keep going.
Do you know, or maybe have a guess on like, this question's hard to ask, but let me give you an example. Is what I've seen owning a couple offices is if we have about 10 new patients a week, that sounds like a lot to a lot of people. But if I can get about 10 new patients a week, we can pretty easily hit 40, 50 grand a month. And I mean, I know it's not all about new patients, but like I feel like every office I've ran, if we could get up to 10 new patients a week, we're hitting 40 grand a month at least. And maybe that number goes up or down a little bit. What did you already said 1,100 a week visits, total visits in your office? Like what did that look like new patient wise to sustain or even to get there?
Yeah, we've historically averaged about 120 new patients a month.
Okay.
And that was because that was really the capacity of that older clinic. And just last year we moved in a newer location. So, now we're averaging, about 160 new patients a month right now.
Wow. Okay. So and in my main office, in my second office is a little bit different. My main office, we're hitting right now 100 new patients a month-ish. Sometimes we're between 80 and 100, which to me is the most I've ever like been able to generate. And I'm still pushing to get to that 120. I would like to get even more than that if we can. Two questions I have where when it comes to that. I'll just say both the questions, but then we'll go back to the first one. So both the questions are, what? So for me, like to get to 100, that for me that looked like we need to do a lot of videos, we need to do a lot of posting, we need to do a lot of ads, we need to do workshops. Like kind of like what does that look like to get to 120 to you? And then the second question would be the processing of those new patients. How do we process them? Because a lot of people couldn't even fathom processing 10 new patients a week.
Yeah, I did an entire webinar 2 months ago on calculating lifetime value of a client and then actually calculating uh, ROI for marketing, and based on knowing your numbers, what your ROI should be and how to know what marketing strategies work the best.
Yep.
So we could probably, with this recording, maybe get a link to that webinar as well if people want to watch that, because that's
Great.
not a question I can answer in like a short period of time. But the simplest answer I always explain is like, think about it like an apple tree, and you're going to go pick as many apples as possible. First thing you're going to do is just grab all the lowest hanging fruit, right? The easiest ones that are going to cost the least amount that you can fill your schedule with. And so what's the marketing strategy in your area that you can implement that's going to have the highest ROI, easiest to generate? Try and maximize that strategy as best as possible. Then layer on another strategy, then layer on another strategy. And so a big part of it is just tracking KPIs, numbers, data to know what's going well, what can be done better, how can we maximize it, what team members do we need. And that's probably one of the biggest separators, for my clinic compared to a lot of them, is I have full-time marketing team members. 6 months into practice, I hired my first full-time marketer. And so right now I have 3 full-time marketing staff.
Okay. So yeah, so that is kind of where I want to go with the question is like I feel like we need to be doing, ads, Facebook ads, online ads, because that's going to get us to maybe whatever this number is. Let's call it 30 new patients or 40 new patients a month. Then you saying add the next strategy might be spinal screening. So we have a team that goes out and does spinal screening. That might get us to 50 or 60. Then you're saying add another strategy, which might be lunch and learns. And then that might help get us to 70 or 80, right? So um, those are the kind of strategies you're implementing to get to 120.
Yep, you got it. That's exactly the same thing. And then, how can you make the Facebook ads better and push that from 40 to 60? How can you make the screenings better? Push that from, 30 more to 40 more. How can you make the health talks better? And so that's that introspection, that structure that I implemented in that third year where we're always reevaluating those processes. How can we refine this? How can we refine our verbiage? How can we refine our conversion rate? What are those ways to constantly be fine tuning those strategies, and then bolting on, those next level strategies to keep going.
Okay. And then so to process all of those new patients to make sure they get a great experience, you're doing great exams, they're getting great care. I know for one thing that's helped me as our new patients went up is using what we call a new patient concierge, right? So there would be like a person in my office that does the day one,
Mhm.
and then me, or there'd be other people that would do like the ROF, right? And then I know some offices are doing group ROFs. Can you explain that process of how you take care of that many patients and give them great care, like what that looks like in your office?
Yeah, I mean, we do a pretty typical day one, day two, consultation, examinations, meet with the doctor, take x-rays, come back for day 2, go over, review of findings, consults, review of x-rays, go through the care plan, sign them up, first adjustment, on that second visit.
So individual ROFs.
Yes.
So, but you have a doctor that's designated for day 1s and day 2s? Because with just 3 doctors, how you doing all the day 1s and all the day 2s and adjusting 1100?
Yeah, and that's an evolution, now currently I do have one of my doctors, that's our head sales doctor, and that's his primary job is reported findings. But, on the front end, I was more in that role, for a while. Then I started training other doctors. They started taking things off my plate, and then they kept growing. And then based on their skill sets, their performance, then I would keep driving them down, the appropriate path, that's necessary. So
Mm-hmm.
that's not a one size fits all answer. It's definitely not going to be the same for everybody. There's going to be different evolutions throughout the process. Like one of the things I talk about is the evolution of CAs. When you first start, you're going to hire people that are chiropractic assistants that are going to help with the front desk a little bit. They might help in the back office. They might help with phones. They might help with, day 1s. They might help with whatever other things in your office. They're kind of a, cross-trained in all different areas. But as you scale, you're going to realize, well, this person is way more outgoing, bubbly. They should sit at the front desk primarily. This person more introverted, good with numbers, detail oriented. They should be more of a back office. This person is really good at relationship building, and persuasion. They should be more in a sales role. And so you're going to start to create more specialists as you scale. And so it just depends kind of on that arc, of your trajectory and who you have on your team. And so that's where team, I'm actually doing a next webinar actually on how we scale to 5 million based on our team, because I know team is definitely the #1 bottleneck to scaling, is finding the right people, putting them in the right seats, and then holding them accountable to their performance.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, let me see what else I was going to ask you about that. Um, do you do a weekly new patient orientation class?
No.
Okay, I don't either. I mean, I always felt like I should, because I feel like just old school chiropractic says you should. You know what I mean?
Yeah, honestly, that is something we've talked about. I do think from just teaching the patient how to think,
Yes,
the overall
exactly.
chiropractic
Maybe helps with
lifestyle
retention or
mindset.
something, maybe.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that would be great from a retention standpoint, and that is something we have done in the past. Currently, we don't, but I think that is something, and that's the
Okay.
thing. I'm always very transparent. It's like, no matter where you're at, I'm sure there's every single clinic in the country is doing something better than me. I can always keep learning, from anybody, and I'm sure there's lots of ways that we can be better than we currently are.
Yeah. Do you find that when you added niches like gut or neuropathy, does that slow your process down a little bit doing those types of exams? Or
It just, yeah, the length of time for the initial appointment,
yeah,
you might be a little bit longer. Definitely adds some, complexity overall into the processes. So that's why I think it's really important to have your base systems down, before you add anything. And I think a lot of doctors, that's where they have a very hard, difficult time scaling, as they try and implement, the kitchen sink from day 1. And
yeah.
so that's very difficult to master so many different things simultaneously. And so, yeah, I feel like, the way we did it with, what's the most important thing that's gonna have the biggest impact on quality of care, and that is the most scalable, do that, and then kind of going through that progression.
And where would you say you get most of your patients for those types of niches like that?
We've had changes, different seasonalities, some strategies work better. We've had seasons where, direct mail was our best strategy, and direct mail hasn't been good now for about 2 years for us. We've had seasons where, like I said, screenings were by far and away, but then we're in Iowa. So, when it's the winter months, we've not a lot of screenings, health talks have been, the best. And so that's why I really am a big proponent of having multifaceted, diversification in your marketing approach, because there's going to be seasonalities where some things are better than others. And obviously I found that out with COVID, because I was so, tied to just those in-person strategies. And so now I have a lot more of a diversification. And once you can really do that, then your strategies start building on each other. That's what I slowly learned, is we never really did anything from a branding standpoint. And when we first started, and I still don't think we do a very good job branding overall, but now that we do, are at a farmer's market, and then we are on TV, and then we are getting something in the mail, and you're seeing us on Facebook, and you're driving by us, there's all these different touch points. So then someone's like, hey, I'm going to stop because I've seen you 4 different times. And so
Yeah.
I think we're starting to hit that, as well.
What about do you have a good way to, like, if you have all these, even if they're just chiropractic patients that come in, do you have a way of filtering them, like, and saying, oh, this person might have neuropathy, let's send them through the neuropathy program, or this person might have gut health issues along with the chiropractic issues, and how do we take them over to that gut health exam? Like, does that
Yeah, we
happen?
keep things really simple. Obviously we have specific ads for, neuropathy or specific symptoms that we market towards. And so if they come in with that specific, main thing, then they're going to go down that route
Yeah.
immediately. But a lot of people just come in as, general with all different types of issues. And then so our paperwork for every single type of style of person is exactly the same. And so on that initial paperwork, it's going to still have, check all the boxes of what symptoms that you have. And then those
Mm,
symptoms are going to indicate, hey, we should do these examinations. And then the results of those examinations are then going to, help us decide on the day two, which, protocols are going to give them the best outcome.
yeah. Um, let me ask you this about your conversion rates. Like, have you done anything in the past to, like, have you seen things that helped improve those, or battled with that at all, or any thoughts on those, like converting to a care plan?
Yeah, I mean, that's really the lifeblood of your clinic, is being able to communicate properly, setting proper value. That's really the whole premise of the first visit, is doing that consultation properly, figuring out, what is the biggest thing that is impacting this person's life that they're going to take action on, that's being detrimental to their quality of life. I always tell my team, people don't sign up because they have headaches. They sign up because their headaches aren't allowing them to spend time with their kids. So
Hmm.
they're paying to spend time with their kids. They're not paying to get to spend time to get rid of their headaches.
Yep.
So that's really the premise of day one, is getting to that level with a patient and say, hey, what is the end goal that you want to accomplish? Yes, you want to get rid of your back pain. Yes, you want to get rid of your digestive issues. Yes, you want to get whatever X, Y, Z. But then how is that going to impact your life positively? And then that's really needs to be the focus of what they're purchasing with that goal in mind.
Gotcha. Okay, so, and then I guess one of the last questions I have for you is about Lucro, and that shirt you're wearing, morelucro.com right there. So signed up with Lucro. We're using them in both of our offices right now, and I get generated a really neat report that helps me to make decisions off of it. But I'm hoping, number one, I hope you can help me to maximize it. So telling me how you use it to run such a big clinic and make decisions off of it. But maybe you should back up and tell everyone if, what is Lucro, because some people may not know.
Yeah. Great question. So as I've grown and scaled, friends, people, friend of a friend through the grapevine, people, hear about, my clinic. And so I get about 4 to 5 doctors a week that call into my clinic, message me on Facebook, ask me questions and say, how did you do this? How did you do that? A lot of people, say, when they first hear about my clinic, well, that's not real. That's, he's just inflating his numbers, all that type of stuff. And so people always want to reach out and ask questions. And I've had people offer me $10,000 for an hour phone call. And I'm always like, no, I got no problem talking to you. What questions can I answer? How can I help? But then most of the time, what my questions went down this line was, I would say, hey, tell me about your numbers. Tell me about what's your revenue, what's your profitability, how much are you spending on marketing, what's your payroll, what are your overheads, what are your margins? Tell me more about your KPIs, your show up rates, your sign up rates, all those types of things. And number one, most doctors didn't know their numbers. And then number two, even more important, even if they knew their numbers, they're like, is that good? Is that the right profit margin? Should I be spending more or less on marketing? Should I be paying my staff more or less? How much money should I keep in the bank? What do I do with the extra revenue? How do I increase revenue? That's the really thing that matters. What I say all the time is read less books and take more action. Because I think that's a really big problem in our profession as a whole. We're doctors, we like to learn, we like education. That's, for most doctors, that's something that is ingrained in us, is constantly learning. And constantly learning without constantly taking action, I think is mostly a waste of time. And so I think that we need to shift our thought process of, instead of learn, it's learn a little, take as much action as possible, then learn a little bit more, take as much action as possible, and go through that progression. And so that's what I realized is doctors don't have a system to do that. And so, my bookkeeper was always months behind, never had my stuff on time, get my books done just in time for tax. And that's how most people view bookkeeping. They're like, bookkeeping? What does that matter? Like, that's just for taxes, who cares, whatever. My wife does it, my niece does it, it doesn't really matter. But financial analysis is the lifeblood of any major business. Any business in the world that's successful, it's usually CEO, and then the COO and the CFO, right? Those are the,
Right.
top level, most important things in the entire business. Sometimes the CFO is even more important than the COO, right? As far as the top direction, you got the vision of the company, you got the operation, you got the finances. And for chiropractic, we're driven by purpose, quality care. A lot of doctors have vision, operations. There's tons of groups that teach day one, day two systems and operations, but there's really nobody that's really teaching more of the business side, the CFO side of things, of what do you do with those numbers. And so that is where I partner with my own fractional CFO, who was consulting for $100 million companies. People were paying him $25,000 a month for his strategic consulting. And so he's like, hey, I'm going to be really transparent with you. People pay me $25,000 a month, but I can give them 80% of the exact same value that they're paying me $25,000 a month for, just off of their monthly P&L, if I have industry specific insights. So he's like, the way that you give insights to a construction company versus a restaurant versus a chiropractor are all going to be different. Have different profit margins, different marketing, labor, overhead, all those costs are going to be industry specific. So he approached me and he's like, hey, I've never heard of anybody in the chiropractic space. I know the financial space, but we really need the perfect marriage of financial expertise and industry specific expertise to be able to give the best strategic advice of how to grow and scale a clinic to the next level. So that's how we partnered, created Lucro. And so that's exactly what we do is you take over your books, utilize QuickBooks. We have a software, the APIs in there, pulls out all the data, reconcile all the transactions. And then by the 10th every month, we give you a report based on your numbers. What are the top action steps you should do in the next 30 days to grow and scale your company and take it to the next level? And we give you that feedback every single month, so you can always be proactively growing and scaling and not hitting plateaus.
Right on. Yep. So now how do I use that? So I get it. I do get those reports every month. I like about it is it's not only bookkeeping, everything below, but at the top there's color coded suggestions, color coded like important areas like marketing, payroll. I know what percentage of my income is going to each one of these areas. In fact, most of them in my offices are pretty within normal limits as far as that goes, except for one area that's always um, more than it should be, it seems like, is my payroll. Um, and like I think I'm close to like 30-40% or something like that. Or maybe more than I'd have to pull out the report to look at it. So how do you just make the choice, make a decision based on those color coded things? Is that what you're doing in your offices?
Good question. I guess share my screen. This might be the easiest way
Okay.
to do this. So yeah. So this is
Yeah.
the report you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And so before we even get to this point, really the two first steps are, what are your goals? Where are you at? Where are you at currently? What was your revenue last year? Profitability, all your numbers, where do you want to get to? And so that's before we ever get started, before we can produce a single report, we need to do a whole strategic planning session. Say, here's where you are, here's where you want to go, how are we going to get there? And so then every month we can actually say, hey, here's your actual data, here's your forecasted or your goal data that you want to accomplish. And then here's also what the perfect P&L says. And the perfect P&L is based on your monthly revenue. You should be spending different amounts in different categories. As your monthly revenue changes, there's going to be different ideal numbers. And so
Mm.
this based off historical data of my clinic, and then lots of clinics that we already work with. And these are constantly being refined. So once we keep scaling, I mean, we've only been around for a few months, already have 100, clients, but as we keep scaling and keep having more and more doctors, we're going to say, hey, these are the top performers in the profession, the top 1% of the profession. This is what their numbers look like. This is essentially the guidebook to financial success of how to grow and scale your clinic. So on a monthly basis, you get those insights and say, here's my numbers, here's where they should be, here's what the goals are annually, year to date. And then, as you said, kind of the overarching goal then is then distill that down for each category. What is the ideal action steps that you can take, to go to the next level? So like I said, we're not specifically a coaching company. We're going to say, or like I said, on day one, it says,
Sure.
hey, income is lower than expected, evaluate your day two sign up rates, right? So, you're doing a good job bringing in new patients, but it's not converting some reason to top line revenue. So you need to
Right.
look deeper into, hey, do I need to do more training on sign up rates? Or hey, maybe your profitability isn't the where it should be. What are some efficiencies or SOPs or operational things that you need to look deeper into to evaluate to create, better systems and efficiencies, higher profitability? Like you were saying, your payroll is maybe a little higher. How can you train your staff better? Where are you maybe a little overstaffed? That you
Mhm.
are losing a little profitability on those numbers. And then you look deeper into those. Like I said, we're not a specific coach or a management company. Like I said, we're only $450 a month, $375 a month comes out to if you pay annually. So we are typically less than you're paying for a regular bookkeeper. Like I said, that's months behind just getting your books done in time for tax season. But we're actually giving you chiropractic and financial specific insights into growing and scaling. And so we're giving you those insights. Then you need to say, hey, what do I do with them? How do I take this to the next level? And so that's where we have the monthly group calls as well, with me leading those, of saying, hey, we're going to dive deeper into some of these topics. Hey, you need to improve your marketing. I did a whole webinar on dialing in marketing. Hey, you need to improve your team. That's the next webinar you're going to do. Hey, you need to dial in, your operations. We're going to do one on there. Hey, you need to dial in, hey, now you're making all this money, of all this extra cash in the bank. What should you do with it? Well, like I said earlier, invest in yourself, invest in the business. Then what? Right? So it's kind of like always staying ahead of that next thing, because what I found with so many doctors is they go down this path for a certain period of time and they slowly start drifting. And by the time they realize they're off center, they're way over here. And then it's this huge arc to get back to center. And our big thing is we want to give you continual feedback very fast, so you never get more than a few degrees off center towards your goals.
So you would recommend, so every month when I get the report, it's like make a to-do list of things to look at and the things to go over based on the suggestions on that report.
Yeah, it's like, what are the top priority action steps
Yep.
that I should take based on my numbers, right? And you should also be doing the same thing with your KPIs, like you talked about earlier: show up rates, sign up rates,
Hmm.
number of new patients, number of Google reviews, number of referrals, some of those other things like that you can maybe pull from your EHR or other place. We're just pulling it, like I said, from your QuickBooks, your bank transactions,
Yeah.
so that's a piece of it, but also that EHR data is probably going to be the other main source of data. And then evaluating based on this data, what is the single largest thing that I need to focus on that's going to have the biggest impact on my business?
Awesome. Well, awesome, man. I know you got to go here pretty soon. So thank you for taking the time to answer these questions for me. I might get you to send me the links for those webinars I could put on here when I send them out. And I think I've been on almost every webinar that you've done already. You might not have known I was there, but I was there. And but I'd like to take a look at those as well.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's the biggest thing. If I could just reiterate one thing for most doctors is, I mean, I got an 8-year-old, a 4-year-old, a 6-month-old, and the biggest things that I try and instill in them, is how to think. And I feel like if you have a framework of how to view, marketing, how to view payroll, how to view team, how to view operations, you have a framework and how to think about things. Then when you see things, hey, that's going good, that's not going good, this is a big red flag, hey, that's on track, hey, it's a little concerning, I'm going to monitor that a little bit deeper. So just being able to have that process of reevaluating what's going well, what's not going well. And then, like I said, more importantly, then what do you do with that data taking the correct actions consistently, you know? And
Yeah.
so that's what a lot of doctors don't know is what is the action do I take? And then do it with this consistent rhythm, you know, over time. And so that's where it comes down to building out a team and scalability and, you know, delegating so that people can keep doing things while you're on vacation, you know, whether you're in the office or not.
Right on. Well, thanks, man. Thanks for being so willing to share everything too, because I know you didn't even know like all of these questions I was going to throw at you right now.
Yeah.
Like I threw out way more, probably than you were expecting, but it helps me a ton, and I'm sure it'll help everybody else that's watching. So thank you for that.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome.